Good evening, folks, and welcome to the Horror Corner. I'm your host, Sean Patrick Urshan, and this week we are doing another tag video. And this one is called The Nightmare on Elm Street tag. Starring this guy right here. If you've got the body, I've got the brains. Ha 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 ha. So that's right. This tag focuses on the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, starring our favorite villain, Freddy Krueger. Such an iconic character, such an iconic boogeyman, and he's probably the most famous boogeyman in horror film history, I would say. And that's hard coming from me, such a hardcore Halloween fan, but I have to admit Freddy is probably the most popular icon in horror history. So the Nightmare on Elm Street tag was created by Movie Freak, and I was tagged by him, and I was also tagged by Horrific Nightmares JM. So check out both of them on YouTube. Like and subscribe to their channels. Couple great guys. So this is 8 questions all about the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. Number 1 is, what is your favorite and least favorite film, and why? So definitely the original is my favorite of the franchise, from 1984, as directed by the great Wes Craven, the horror master. I absolutely love the film. I love everything about it. I love the concept of it. I love all the characters. I love the cast. And I love Robert Englund as Freddy Krueger. Freddy Krueger is such an amazing boogeyman, such an amazing character. And he's played so great by Robert Englund. Just so iconic. And yeah, I love the concept of a boogeyman that chases you in your dreams, because that's something that I think we could all relate to, because I'm sure all of you have had that dream in your life, you know, when you're being chased by the boogeyman and just as he's about to kill you, you wake up and you're sweating and you're scared to death, you know. I'm sure we've all had that at some point. So I think that's a brilliant concept, and it's executed so well by Wes Craven. And yeah, I love the characters, and the cast is fantastic, especially Heather Langenkamp as Nancy Thompson. And we'll talk about her later. And the worst in the franchise to me is definitely Freddy's Dead, the Final Nightmare. Yeah, I don't like that one at all. I feel like it's a complete farce. It's a complete comedy, you know. It's less and less about the horror and more about the silliness of it, and the fact of Freddy being like a stand-up comedian, spouting the one-liners left and right, and it just becomes so silly and ridiculous. Every sequence becomes like a setup for Freddy Krueger to have the punchline, to pay off with the joke, you know. It's so bad. So next up is number 2 is, which movie has the best Freddy? And I might get a lot of flack for this, but I think Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, Freddy's Revenge, has the best version of Freddy. Obviously it's still played by Robert Englund, but I feel like he was even more menacing in Part 2, even more evil, even more dark, and just a malevolent presence, you know, and I feel like he's so scary, and I love the makeup job on, has the best makeup job, too, in Part 2, I think. So yeah, and he's not all about the jokes and the one-liners, although he does have a few great ones in it, but it's not all about that, it's about the horror of it. Yeah, so Part 2 for me. Number 3, did you mind the humor as the sequels progressed? Yes, I did mind it, because I feel like that's part of the problem. That's why the series went downhill, because it became all about Freddy and the one-liners and him being like a stand-up comedian who just happens to kill people, you know. And like I said before, you know, every nightmare sequence, no matter how creative or cool it was, is just like a setup for Freddy to have a one-liner at the end. And that always bothers me after a while. It gets old after a while, you know. And especially comes to a crescendo in Part 6 of Freddy's Dead, where it's just completely ridiculous, you know. Number 4, what are some of your favorite kills? So for me, definitely Tina in the original Nightmare on Elm Street is a great kill. Especially the whole dream sequence leading up to it, when she sees him in the alleyway and his arms get long and they're scraping against the house. That part's awesome. And then up to the scene where she gets, where Freddy's like invisible and Rod can't see him. All he sees is Tina getting slashed to death, and she's going up the wall and up into the ceiling, and the blood's flowing everywhere, all over the ceiling, and she's upside down. It's crazy. It's really sick sequence. And I love the effects in that as well. It's so cool. Also, the Roach Motel scene in Nightmare on Elm Street 4, the Dream Master, which is one of the few good scenes in that movie. But I love the whole thing when you see her slowly turning into the roach, and then you see her in the Roach Motel, which Freddy grabs by the palm of his hand, and he squishes it, and you see the ooze come out, and he's like, "You can check in, but you can't check out." And then I also love Taryn's death in Part 3 from Nightmare on Elm Street 3 Dream Warriors. I always thought that was a cool, like, it's got that great 80s vibe to it, where you see she's dressed up like a classic punk rocker with the switchblade. She's like, "In my dreams, I'm beautiful and bad." And then she's got the mohawk going, and the leather with the studs. And you see she has a heroin issue, so in this dream sequence you see her arms, she's got holes in them, and the holes are actually alive. It's creepy. And then you see Freddy come out, and all his fingers are syringes, and he digs the syringes deep into her arms and empties the syringes. It's really sick. So that's one of my favorites. So number 5, Robert Englund is irreplaceable. But if you had to, who would you cast as Freddy Krueger? I would never want to do that. I would never want to have that task in replacing Robert Englund as Freddy Krueger, because to me, he is Freddy Krueger. No one could possibly ever play Freddy as well as he does in my eyes. But I think the guy who could come the closest is Andrew Divoff from the Wishmaster series, if you guys have ever seen that. The Jinn character is kind of similar to Freddy in a way, where he's in the heavy prosthetic makeup, but he also has like a lot of like one-liners like Freddy, but at the same time he is very evil and menacing, and there's a lot of malevolence behind his actions, but I feel like he could bring that classic Robert Englund kind of style to Freddy Krueger and bring that back. And I feel like he'd be the next best thing if you couldn't actually get Robert Englund. I feel like he would bring back that style to Freddy, and I would like that. So yeah, Andrew Divoff from the Wishmaster series. Number 6 is, was Freddy vs. Jason worth the wait? What would you have done differently? I do think Freddy vs. Jason was worth the wait. I know it was in developmental hell for years, like I believe it was like almost 10 years, that they couldn't quite get it off the ground, but I feel like it came together very well. I really enjoy the film. Yes, there are a few things I would change. So what would I have done differently? I would not have used any CGI. I would have just used practical effects all the way. Because that's what really dates the film, is it's got that early 2000s CGI that wasn't quite... It looks like almost like a bad sci-fi channel movie at times with the bad CGI. And I think that hurts it. And also I would have hired a director that is more knowledgeable on the lore of the franchise. That whole thing where Jason's afraid of the water... Obviously, he didn't do his homework, Jason is not afraid of the water. Come on. Never has been. I mean, maybe when he was a child, when he first died, he was afraid and he couldn't swim. But you see him plenty times throughout the franchise going into the lake and going into the water, so it's not that much of an issue. So, number 7 is who was the best final girl? Without a doubt, it's Nancy Thompson, as played by the great Heather Langenkamp. To me, she is Freddy's ultimate nemesis, you know. She's her arch rival, you know, for Freddy Krueger. She's like the Dr. Loomis of the series, you know. You see her, and she returns to the role a couple times after the original, and you see her again in Part 3, and then you see her again in Wes Craven's New Nightmare, and she's great every time. She's such a great, she's one of the greatest final girls of all times, because the way she fights back against Freddy, she does her homework. She sets up all these booby traps. She reads books about how to set up booby traps, and she does her research on how to survive in this type of scenario. And that's what I love about her. She's so resourceful, so intelligent, beautiful, and she's such a great character. Number 8, what are some of your favorite sequels? So for me, it's mainly 2. And that is Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, Freddy's Revenge. I know it gets a lot of hate, but I love the film. I know it does have several flaws, yes, I agree. But it's got a lot of great stuff in there. It's got a lot of scary stuff. It's got some great scary dream sequence, like that original beginning part in the bus. That whole scene was awesome. And the fact that Freddy Krueger is at his absolute best in this film. And I think there's a lot of scary scenes. And it's still got that dark tone from the original film, which I love, you know. It's very dark, very dimly lit. It's got great atmosphere. Yeah, some of the performances are a little bad, you know, like the lead, Jesse, isn't very convincing at times, you know. And, oh god, that dance, let's not even get started about that dance that he does in the movie. Oh, cringeworthy. But overall, I really enjoy the film, and I really enjoy Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3, Dream Warriors, which is, some people like even better than the original. Definitely Part 3 is beloved by pretty much all Nightmare on Elm Street fans, and it's a great sequel, no question about it. I love the aspect of the Dream Warriors, how they all get together in group therapy and they work together in their dream, and they fight off Freddy Krueger. They all have different powers in their dreams. I really like that idea, and it's such a great, and of course the return of Nancy Thompson is awesome, and you got a solid cast. You got Lawrence Fishburne in there, you got Patricia Arquette as Kristen Parker. She does a fantastic job. Everybody in the film is great. Robert Englund is great once again. You got John Saxon again returning. Awesome, awesome movie. So, and that's it for the Nightmare on Elm Street tag as created by Movie Freak. So now it's my turn to tag some people. I'm going to tag Jen's Reviews from the Grave. I'm going to tag HoRRoRdIgEsT. I'm going to tag TheWickerBoy. I'm going to tag Emily on Elm Street. How appropriate. Bushman Blu, Movie Massacre. So guys, answer the call and do the Nightmare on Elm Street tag by Movie Freak. And thank you for joining me, Sean Patrick Gershon, in the Horror Corner. Tune in and stay scared.